The following video explains the guidelines for officiating Halifax Minor Basketball's defensive rules modification. This video is for teams playing in the junior mini, and bantam divisions. To apply these guidelines, coaches, players, and officials must understand three basic concepts: the wall, the line of the ball, and one or two passes from the ball. The wall is an imaginary line which runs through the middle of the offensive zone, splitting the key into two equal parts. To have a foot on or over the wall is to be on both sides of the wall. The line of the ball is an imaginary line parallel to the baseline, which moves up and down the court with the ball, whether it's being dribbled or passed. One or two passes from the ball refers to the positioning of offensive players on the court. It's important to identify whether a player is one pass or two or more passes away from the ball in order to understand legal defensive positioning. An offensive player is considered one pass away from the ball when they are one normal pass from the ball and there are no other offensive players between this player and the ball handler. All other players are considered two or more passes away from the ball. Examples of players who are one pass from the ball would include around the perimeter, post entries, perimeter to high post to low post. Please note, while it may be technically possible to pass the ball in some extreme situations, such passes cannot be considered normal. It is up to the referees to judge whether a player is one or more than one pass away from the ball. Let's examine the defensive restrictions using these three concepts. Keep in mind that the ball handler must be actively defended within 2 meters once he reaches the three-point area. If the player being guarded is above the line of the ball and one pass away, the defender cannot drop below the line of the ball. In the following example, offensive player 2 is above the line of the ball and one normal pass away. As a result, defensive player 2 cannot drop into the area below the line of the ball. If the player being guarded is above the line of the ball and two or more passes away, the defender cannot be below the line of the ball or past the wall. In the following example, offensive player 2 is above the line of the ball and two or more passes from the ball. As a result, defensive player 2 is allowed to drop off his player even to the point of standing in the key, as long as he stays on or above the line of the ball and on his player's side of the wall. If the player being guarded is below the line of the ball and one pass away, the defender must be within 2 meters of his player. In the following example, offensive player 3 is below the line of the ball and one normal pass away. As a result, defensive player 3 must be in an active defensive position of no further than 2 meters from his player. If the player being guarded is below the line of the ball and two or more passes away, the defender is allowed to be below the line of the ball but must stay on the same side of the wall as the player he is guarding. In the following example, offensive player 4 is below the line of the ball and two or more passes away. As a result, defensive player 4 is allowed to drop off his player even to the point of standing in the key, as long as he stays on his player's side of the wall. Keep in mind that the movement of the ball and offensive players will create an environment of constantly changing defensive requirements. In the following example, defensive player 3 is allowed to drop into the key on the right side of the wall because his player is below the line of the ball and two or more passes away. But when offensive player 3 moves to the top of the key, he is now above the line of the ball and one pass away. As a result, defensive player 3 must move to a position on or above the line of the ball. In this example, notice how the defense's positioning must change to maintain a legal position as the ball is passed around the perimeter by the offense. Be aware that legal defense can look like a zone when in fact it is simply a good application of these defensive guidelines. In the following example, it could appear that the defense is playing a zone, when in reality the offense's positioning and lack of movement allows the defense to play in such a manner. If the offense were to run a player through the key, it would quickly become evident whether the defense is playing a zone or not. Coaches are reminded that every offensive player must be attempting to move to a scoring position. To place players at the extreme edges of the court goes against the spirit of youth basketball, and the defense is not required to chase their players out there. Defenses must be careful to not jump across the wall too early to initiate help defense. In the following example, offensive player 2 is attempting to beat defensive player 2 one-on-one. Because of the positioning of the rest of the offensive players, defensive player 2 is the only player allowed on the same side of the wall as the ball. Defensive players 4 and 5 must be careful not to step over the line of the wall to help until offensive player 2 has gained an offensive advantage. Once defensive player 2 has been placed in a disadvantage, his teammates can cross the wall to help. In situations like this, it is expected to see a momentary double team form as more than one defensive player will often respond with help defense. Of course, once the ball enters the key, all defensive restrictions are off and players should expect to see double and even triple teams. In conclusion, proper defensive positioning requires an understanding of the wall, the line of the ball, and one or two passes from the ball. An offensive player is considered one pass from the ball when they are one normal pass away and no other offensive player are between them and the ball. All other offensive players are considered two or more passes from the ball. The ball handler must be actively guarded within 2 meters once he reaches the 3-point area. If a player being guarded is above the line of the ball and one pass away, the defender cannot drop below the line of the ball. If the player being guarded is above the line of the ball and 2 or more passes away, the defender cannot drop below the line of the ball or past the wall. If the player being guarded is below the line of the ball and one pass away, the defender must be within 2 meters of his player. If the player being guarded is below the line of the ball and 2 or more passes away, the defender is allowed below the line of the ball but not past the wall. Legal defenses can look like a zone if there is little or no movement in the offense. Once the ball handler enters the key, all defensive restrictions are off. It is up to the referees to judge whether a player is legally positioned or not.